Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto could control the 10 tails and became the king of a monster girl harem? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Birth of a God. The war was over. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, a suffocating blanket laid over a world carved into ruin. The sky, once choked with smoke and the light of clashing techniques, was now a bruised, indifferent gray. Craters wept brackish water onto fields of ash that had once been forests. The bodies of shinobi, allies and enemies alike, lay scattered across the broken earth. Their dreams and ambitions reduced to the same mute stillness. At the epicenter of it all stood Naruto Uzumaki. He was no longer the boy they knew. The vibrant orange of his jacket was tattered and stained, a forgotten relic of a simpler time. Before him, the monstrous husk of the Gedo Mazo crumbled, its purpose finally undone. Within him, a storm raged. The chakra of the nine-tailed beasts, reclaimed and reassembled, churned with the raw, untamed consciousness of their origin, the 10 tails. Sasuke stood 100 yards away, one arm gone, his remaining hand clenched. Sakura was beside him, her healing arts exhausted, her face a mask of weary hope. They were waiting for him to perform the final, expected act. They were waiting for him to release the Biju, to rest. Or the balance the Sage of Six Paths had intended. To become the savior they all needed him to be. But Naruto was looking past them, past the horizon, past the very fabric of their reality. He could feel it now. The universe laid bare to his senses. The flow of life and death, the hum of distant stars, the silent screams of dimensions tearing and healing. He could feel the threads of every living thing. A symphony of existence he had only ever heard as disjointed noise before. To separate the Biju now, to break apart this perfect, terrifying whole, felt like gouging out his own eyes after seeing color for the first time. A ghostly, translucent figure appeared before him, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the Sage of Six Paths. His ancient eyes were filled with a profound sadness. It is too much, my son. No single mortal is meant to contain this power. It will consume you. It will turn you into the very thing you fought against. Release them. Let them be free once more. Naruto's gaze met the sage's. There was no defiance in his eyes. No flicker of arrogance. There was only a calm, unnerving certainty. You divided it to prevent a monster from returning, he sent back, his thoughts resonating not with words, but with pure intent. But you only created 9 weapons for humanity to fight over. You delayed the inevitable. The problem wasn't the power. It was the vessel. He closed his eyes. He didn't push back against the Jubi's consciousness. He didn't fight for control. He simply opened the floodgates of his own soul and accepted it. He let the primal rage, the ancient loneliness, the creative and destructive force of a young world wash over him. His own will, forged in the fires of loss, loneliness, and unwavering determination, was not a dam against the tide, it was the shoreline, defining its shape. Giving it purpose. He was not its jailer. He was its heart. Hagoromo's form flickered, a look of shock crossing his ethereal face. He saw Naruto's soul not being consumed, but expanding, merging. Becoming something new. The sage reached out a hand, a final plea. What are you doing? Becoming what I was meant to be. The Sage of Six Paths faded, his age over, his final plea unanswered. Outside, the world began to break. Sasuke's Sharingan spun wildly. What is this chakra? It's still growing. The ground began to vibrate, the very air turning thick and heavy, echoing with an energy that tasted of ozone and starlight. Naruto's form began to glow, a blinding white light that forced everyone to shield their eyes. He floated off the ground, his body a nexus foe. Power that was tearing a hole in the sky above. The gray clouds were ripped apart, not by wind, but by a sheer gravitational wrongness. A vortex of impossible colors, of screaming violet and silent, hungry black, swirled into existence. His body shifted within the light. For a moment, he was a being of pure energy, then a colossus with 10 tails of raw power whipping behind him, each lash leaving a scar on reality itself. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light contracted, folding back into him. Naruto descended, his feet touching the ash-covered ground without a sound. He looked the same. Same height, same build, same blonde hair, but he was fundamentally, irrevocably different. The whisker marks on his cheeks were slightly deeper, more defined, like elegant scars. And his eyes held the universe. They were a deep, impossible blue, but within them, a 9-tomo Rinne Sharingan spun slowly, the pattern not red and black, but a brilliant, cosmic gold. They were not the eyes of a man. They were the eyes of a god. He had become the complete, perfect Jinchuriki. A true sage of 1,000 forms. Far away, in a different fold of reality, the forest was on fire. Black sea. At ears were flattened against Kuroka's head as she vaulted over a fallen, burning log. Her elegant black kimono was ripped and blood-stained, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Behind her, spells of blinding light and holy energy tore through the trees, turning ancient oaks to splinters. There she is. The stray must not escape. The voices were sharp, righteous, and utterly without mercy. Angels, or devils masquerading as them. It didn't matter. They wanted her dead for the crime of existing, for the sin her masters had committed. She was just a tool to be discarded, a loose end to be purged. She skidded to a halt at the edge of a cliff. A dead end. Her senjutsu and tuki were nearly depleted. Blood dripped from a deep gash on her arm. She could hear them closing in, the arrogant rustle of their wings. This was it. She could turn and fight, a final blaze of glory that would accomplish nothing. Or she could jump. As she stared into the abyss, ready to choose her own end, the world broke in front of her. The air before her tore. There was no other word for it. It ripped open like fabric, revealing not the chasm below, but a swirling, chaotic vortex of color and energy that pulled at her very soul. It was terrifying, alien, and utterly unlike any magic she had ever seen. The pull was immense, a silent hurricane that yanked her from her feet. Her pursuers broke through the tree line, their faces masks of shock as they saw the anomaly. Kuroka didn't have time to scream. She was sucked into the rift, her world dissolving into a nauseating, kaleidoscopic blur. She landed with a sickening thud, the impact knocking the last of the air from her lungs. She lay gasping on cracked, gray earth, the unfamiliar sky above a sheet of slate. The air was acrid, smelling of old smoke and spent power. She pushed herself up, her body screaming in protest, and took in the scene. A battlefield, an apocalyptic one, and in the center of it, a figure. The power rolling off him was staggering. It dwarfed anything she had ever felt. The strongest devil kings, the mightiest dragons, even the great red itself. It was a silent, suffocating pressure that felt less like an aura and more like a fundamental law of this new, terrifying place. This had to be the source of the rift that had pulled her here. Her survival instincts screamed at her to hide, to become invisible. But before she could move, another rent in reality appeared, this one high in the sky. It was a clean, precise tear, a black slit that opened to reveal a space of cold, dead stars. From it, a man descended. He was unnaturally pale, with stark white hair and a small, pointed horn jutting from his hairline. He wore immaculate white robes and moved with an effortless grace, his feet coming to a stop a few inches above the ground. His eyes, a soft, lavender color, swept across the devastation with an air of profound boredom, before finally settling on Naruto. They held no fear, only a faint, clinical disgust. A mortal vessel, the newcomer spoke. His voice soft, yet carrying with its own intrinsic authority. Tainted by the filth of a lesser world. It has dared to merge with the progenitor's sacred seed, the Shinju. He clicked his tongue, a sound of immense disappointment. It has not been consumed. It has hybridized, a disgusting beast. It must be purged. He raised a hand, and a sphere of absolute blackness, a truth-seeking orb, materialized above his palm. It hummed with the power to turn all things to dust. Kuroka's blood ran cold. She recognized that level of power. It was an attack that could erase a mountain. And he wielded it as casually as one might toss a stone. He flicked his wrist. The orb shot towards Naruto, a silent missile of absolute negation. Naruto did not move. He did not raise a hand, form a seal, or even seem to brace for the impact. He simply lifted his gaze. His cosmic eyes met the attack. The truth-seeking orb stopped dead, inches from his face. It wobbled in the air, its perfect form distorting. The humming intensified into a high-pitched shriek, as if the very concept of erasure was being met by something greater. Then, like a drop of ink in clear water, it dissolved. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It simply came apart, its energy unraveling into harmless, glittering motes of light that drifted away on the dead breeze. The Otsutsuki scout's jaw went slack. The serene arrogance on his face was replaced by a flicker of pure, undiluted disbelief. It was a look that said the sun had just risen in the west. Impossible, he breathed, to nullify the power of. He never finished the sentence. He tried to speak again, but no sound came out. He tried to move, to flee back through the portal he'd created, but his body wouldn't respond. A look of terror bloomed on his pale features as he felt his own existence begin to fray at the edges. His perfectly defined form started to flicker, like a bad projection. His voice became a garbled static. From his position across the field, Naruto slowly, deliberately, clenched his right fist. And the Otsutsuki scout vanished. It was not violent. There was no explosion, no puff of smoke, no scream of agony. One moment, he was there. A being of immense power and celestial authority. The next, he was not. The space he had occupied was now empty. The universe, it seemed, had forgotten he had ever existed. Silence. The sheer, understated finality of the act was more terrifying than any display of roaring power Kuroka had ever witnessed. This wasn't the act of a warrior. This was the act of a creator swatting a fly from his canvas. Naruto's head turned. His gaze, which held swirling galaxies and the cold, hard math of creation, drifted over the ruined landscape, past the distant, shocked figures of the other shinobi, and came to rest directly on the hiding place of the wounded, terrified Nekosho. Kuroka froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, say the last of her energy to run as far and as fast as she could. But a deeper, more primal part of her, the part that had been hunted and hated for so long, recognized what she had just seen. She had not witnessed the rage of a mindless monster. She had witnessed the calm, absolute authority of a king. In that overwhelming, world-shattering power, she did not see a threat. She saw a sanctuary. Naruto took a single, silent step in her direction, his presence washing over her, not with menace, but with a profound, earth-shaking stillness. The age of shinobi and devils was over. A new age had just been born. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Knight and the King. The world reformed itself around him. In the days following his transformation, Naruto did not speak. He did not need to. His will was now the ambient language of the land. The other shinobi, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, the remaining cage, had approached him cautiously. They had asked questions, their voices tight with a mixture of awe and terror. What was he? What did he intend to do? He gave them no answers they could understand. He simply reached out, not with his hands, but with his power. He smoothed the cracked earth. He coaxed clean, pure water from the depths to fill the craters. He touched a single, petrified splinter of the god tree, and from it, a forest erupted. It was not a normal forest. The trees were a vibrant, impossible silver white, their leaves shimmering with a soft, internal light. The air beneath their canopy was clean and crisp, saturated with a life-giving energy that soothed weary bodies and calmed frayed nerves. He was terraforming, creating a sanctuary from the ashes of the war. But this act of creation was a declaration. It was a border. He was carving out a piece of the world for himself, a domain where his will was absolute. The Shinobi Alliance, unnerved by a power they couldn't measure or control, retreated to their own lands to watch, and to whisper, and to fear. He worked for a week, his form a silent, purposeful blur moving through the nascent landscape. He raised gentle hills, carved winding rivers, and seeded the ground with flora that hummed with his own chakra. It was a kingdom being born not from conquest, but from raw creation. It was this act that drew new attention. They arrived at dawn, their hooves thundering across the new plains like a rolling storm. There were perhaps 200 of them. Their upper bodies armored in worn but well-maintained steel, their powerful equine forms moving with a disciplined grace that spoke of generations of martial tradition. They were centaurs, refugees from a world Naruto could not yet see, drawn across the thinning veil of reality by the sheer life force emanating from his new domain. At their head rode a figure of breathtaking pride. Her hair was a cascade of brilliant blonde, tied back in a practical, severe ponytail. Her eyes were a fierce, intelligent blue, and her face, though noble, was set in a grim, determined line. Her armor was functional steel, bearing the crest of a rearing horse, and at her side was a massive lance, its tip gleaming in the morning sun. This was Centuria Shionis, matriarch and last general of the Shionis clan. They stopped at the edge of the Silver Forest, their formation a perfect, disciplined line. They did not attack. They simply waited, their presence a silent, potent challenge. Naruto appeared before them, not through speed, but by simply being there. He stood at the edge of his forest, the light from the silver leaves casting shifting patterns across his simple black clothing. He was unarmed, his posture relaxed. Yet he was the undeniable center of the entire landscape. Centaure's eyes narrowed. This was the being whose power had called to them, a beacon of life in the void between worlds. She had expected a beast, a titan, a monster. She saw only a man, one whose quiet presence felt heavier than a mountain. She dismounted, her steel-shod hooves sinking slightly into the soft earth. With a practiced motion, she drew a longsword from her back, its polished blade catching the light. She did not point it at him. She held it before her, tip angled to the sky, in a formal salute. "I am Centuria Shionis," she declared, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the field without the need to shout. "And I challenge you, lord of this land." Behind her, her clan watched, their hands resting on the pommels of their own weapons. They were not hostile, but they were ready. Naruto's golden Rinne Sharingan spun slowly, observing, comprehending. He felt no malice from her, only a rigid, unbending code. Why? His voice was not heard, but felt, a thought that bloomed directly in Centaure's mind, calm and inquisitive. The telepathic contact startled her, but she did not let it show. "Power without honor is tyranny," she stated, her voice unwavering. "You have created this sanctuary, a place my people desperately need. But we will not bend our knee to a master whose heart we do not know. A leader must prove their worthiness not just through power, but through character. I will test that character. I will test your strength. If I am defeated, my people and I will serve you with our lives. If you are defeated, you will cede this land to our protection." It was an impossibly bold, almost suicidal demand, to challenge the entity who had forged the very ground she stood upon. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Naruto's lips. It was the first expression anyone had seen on his face since the end of the war. He appreciated the clarity of it, the simple, direct honesty. It was a refreshing change from the political maneuvering of shinobi and the celestial arrogance of the Otsutsuki. He gave a slow, single nod. "I accept." He didn't summon a weapon. He didn't create a monstrous avatar. He simply raised his hands, his posture shifting into the familiar, balanced stance of a martial artist. Centuria took this as the signal. She charged. She moved with the force of an avalanche. The ground shook with the impact of her hooves, each stride covering 20 feet. She was a living battering ram of muscle and steel, her longsword held low, aimed for a disabling cut to his legs. To any normal opponent, the sheer speed and mass would have been unstoppable. Naruto didn't retreat. He took a single step forward to meet her. At the last possible second, as the blade was about to connect, he dropped low, his body moving with a liquid grace that defied the eye. He swept a hand across the ground. The soft earth beneath Centaure's charging hooves suddenly turned to a thick, viscous mud. Grabbing at her legs, throwing her momentum into chaos. She was a master horsewoman, her balance impeccable even on her own body. She compensated instantly, shifting her weight. But the momentary disruption was all Naruto needed. He flowed around her, a hand gently touching the flat of her sword. A seal, invisible and intangible, flared for a microsecond. The S word in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, its connection to her will severed. It clattered to the ground. Disarmed but not defeated, she bellowed a war cry and lashed out with a powerful kick from her front legs. A blow that could shatter granite. Naruto was no longer there. He was behind her, his fingers gently tapping a pressure point at the base of her human spine. A jolt of paralyzing energy shot through her. Not enough to cause pain, but enough to make her muscles lock up. She stumbled, her body refusing to obey her commands. She fought it, her warrior's spirit roaring in defiance of the nerve block. She forced her arms to move, swiping blindly behind her. Naruto simply watched her struggle, his expression unreadable. "Your honor is admirable," his thought voice echoed in her mind. "But you mistake strength for brutality. A true ruler does not need to break his subjects to command them." He raised a hand. From the ground around them, a dozen pillars of silver wood erupted, forming a perfect cage. They did not touch her, but they penned her in completely, their surfaces humming with a gentle, restraining energy. The duel was over. He had defeated her without landing a single blow, without causing a single scratch. He had used her own momentum against her, controlled the battlefield, and neutralized her with surgical precision. It was a display of absolute, overwhelming control. Centuria stood panting in the wooden cage, her body slowly regaining its feeling. She was defeated, utterly and completely. Her pride stung, but beneath it, a different emotion was taking root: respect. He had not humiliated her. He had instructed her. Before she could formally concede, a new sound cut through the air. A volley of kunai, trailing explosive tags, rained down from the trees at the edge of the plain. They were not aimed at Naruto or Centuria, but at the disciplined formation of the Centaur clan. "Filthy beasts! This is our land!" A dozen figures dropped from the branches. They were rogue shinobi, scavengers and bandits who had been drawn to the area by the lingering chakra of the war. They saw the centaurs not as people, but as exotic, valuable prizes to be captured or slaughtered. The centaurs reacted instantly, forming a defensive circle, their warriors drawing bows and swords to protect the young and the elderly within. But they were on open ground, vulnerable to the ninjas' guerrilla tactics. Centaure's head snapped around, her eyes blazing with fury and fear for her people. No, Naruto's gaze turned cold. It was the first flicker of genuine anger she had seen from him. He didn't look at the rogue ninja. He looked at the forest. Protect them. The command was not to any person. It was to the land itself. The silver-white forest answered. The trees at the edge of the plain moved. Their branches elongated, weaving together at impossible speeds to form a solid, impenetrable wall of living wood, catching the second volley of kunai. Roots thicker Han, a man's waist erupted from the ground, snaking through the earth like colossal serpents. They did not crush the ninja. They moved with intelligent purpose, wrapping around their ankles, their wrists, their torsos, lifting them into the air and holding them fast. One of the ninja, a desperate look in his eyes, managed to complete a series of hand seals for a powerful fire-style jutsu. He spewed a massive fireball at the centaurs. Before it could travel 10 feet, a wall of water, pulled from the river a mile away, rose from the earth to meet it, turning the attack to harmless steam. The ninja stared, dumbfounded, as the water then formed into a liquid prison around him. Within 30 seconds, the entire skirmish was over. All 12 rogue ninja were captured, held harmlessly by the environment itself. They were disarmed, immobilized, and completely at the mercy of the will that commanded the very soil they stood on. Naruto lowered his hand. The wooden cage around Centuria dissolved back into the earth. She stood free, her sword lying at her feet. She stared at the captured ninja, then back at the man who stood calmly before her. He had not moved from his spot. He had protected her entire clan, neutralized a dozen threats, and commanded the 4 elements as if they were extensions of his own body, all without taking a single step. He had shown her his power in their duel. Now, he had shown her his character. His power was not for his own glory. It was a shield for those who sought sanctuary under his domain. Her choice was clear. Centuria knelt. It was not the clumsy, awkward kneel of a biped. It was the proud, formal genuflection of a knight, her human torso bowing low, her equine body folding with a grace that was both powerful and deferential. It was the highest sign of respect her people could offer. "My blade, my life, and my people are yours, my lord," she said, her voice thick with an emotion that went beyond mere surrender. It was loyalty, earned and freely given. "Command us." Behind her, 200 centaurs, witnessing the miracle, knelt as one. The thunder of their unified movement was the first oath of allegiance sworn to the new king of this burgeoning land. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A Devil's Bargain. The kingdom grew, not through hammer and stone, but through will and water and wood. Naruto's sanctuary, now named Arborea, by its inhabitants, was a thriving testament to his power. The silver forest pulsed with a gentle, life-giving light, and the rivers ran with water so pure it seemed to hum. The Centaur clan, under Ceres' disciplined command, established patrols and began cultivating the fertile new plains. Kuroka, finding a surprising comfort in the shadows of the silver trees, became his unofficial spymaster, her senses attuned to the world beyond their borders. And then there was Mito. She had arrived a few days after the centaurs, a whirlwind of red hair and sealing scrolls, having followed the signature of Naruto's Uzumaki chakra across dimensions. She was older, sharper, with eyes that saw the world in terms of arrays and logistical chains. Where Naruto was the heart of the kingdom, Mito quickly became its brain. She organized the centaurs into work teams, designed irrigation channels using basic water seals, and was already drawing up plans for a central settlement. Naruto himself was the quiet center of it all. He rarely gave direct orders. He simply was. He spent his days in the heart of the forest, seated on a throne that was not built, but grown for him, a massive, living root of a silver tree, polished smooth and shaped into a seat of natural authority. He was the anchor, and around him, a new society was taking its first, tentative steps. It was into this nascent peace that a new power intruded. The air in the central clearing, where Mito was directing a team of centaurs in laying foundational stones, suddenly grew thick and heavy. The natural energy of the forest recoiled, as if shying away from something profoundly artificial. On the ground, a pattern of impossibly complex lines began to glow with a brilliant, crimson light. It expanded rapidly, forming a perfect circle 100 feet across. Inscribed with symbols that spoke of ancient pacts and infernal power, Kuroka appeared beside Naruto's throne, melting out of a shadow. Her tail was rigid, her ears flat against her head. "Devils," she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "High class. That's a Grimoire crest." Naruto's cosmic eyes watched the phenomenon without emotion. He had felt their approach moments before the circle even began to form. A pinprick of arrogant, structured power moving through the void. Saria, having heard the commotion, galloped into the clearing, her lance held at the ready, her clan forming a disciplined line behind her. The light flared, and from its center, a group of figures emerged. At their lead was a young woman with a cascade of crimson hair that seemed to defy gravity. Her form was stunning, her confidence absolute. She wore a smile that was both a weapon and an invitation. This was Rias Grimoire, heiress to one of the underworld's most powerful families. Behind her stood her Pira, Ge, a handsome blonde youth with a knight's aura, a small white-haired girl with a stoic expression, a tall, beautiful woman whose smile held a hint of thunder, and a brown-haired boy whose eyes darted around with a nervous, lecherous energy that was jarringly out of place. Rias's eyes, a vibrant blue-green, swept over the scene. She took in the silver trees, the powerful centaurs, the red-haired woman directing them, and finally, the figure on the living throne. Her smile widened. This was it, the source of the power surge that had sent ripples through every dimension. "Greetings," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, imbued with a confidence that expected to be obeyed. "I am Rias Grimoire. I have come to this beautiful, newborn land to speak with its master." Her gaze fixed on Naruto. Naruto didn't stand. He simply tilted his head, a gesture of mild curiosity. "You have found him." The telepathic voice, calm and ancient, took Rias and her peerage by surprise. Issei flinched. Akino's smile became a little more fixed. Rias, however, recovered instantly. A being of immense power, and a telepath as well, she mused aloud, her tone appreciative, as if inspecting a fine work of art. "We in the underworld have a great respect for power. We believe it should be nurtured, guided, and given its proper place in the grand order of things." She took a step forward, her hips swaying with practiced grace. "Your domain is rustic, quaint, but it is isolated, unprotected. There are forces in the multiverse, fallen angels, rogue gods, other, less, civilized devils, who would see this power not as something to be respected, but as something to be conquered and consumed. You need allies. You need structure." She stopped a respectful distance from the throne. "The House of Grimoire can provide that. We can offer you a title of nobility, a place in our territories, recognized and protected by the might of the 72 pillars." In return for your allegiance, of course. A simple pact, your power in service to my family, and my family's power in service to your security. It was a standard recruitment pitch, one she had likely given to dozens of powerful beings. She was offering him a gilded cage, assuming he was a wild beast who didn't know any better. Naruto remained silent for a long moment. He could see the proposal for what it was. A contract, a chain, an attempt to classify him, too. Put him in a box so he could be understood and controlled. He could feel the web of pacts and laws she represented, a rigid, artificial structure built on ambition and a thirst for influence. I have power, he finally responded, his thought voice echoing in the quiet clearing. And I have a home. I require nothing else. Rias's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. That was not the expected answer. She had expected negotiation, questions, perhaps even a brutish refusal. This was a dismissal. It was the simple, unvarnished truth of a being who was utterly self-sufficient. Perhaps you don't understand, she pressed, a hint of condescension creeping into her tone. To be a lone god is to be a target. To be part of a peerage, part of a great house, is to be part of a fortress. She gestured to the boy behind her. My pawn, Issei, holds the spirit of a heavenly dragon. Even he understands the need for. Before she could finish, the air ripped open again. This time it was not a precise, elegant circle, but a violent, jagged tear of purple-black energy. The smell of sulfur and arrogance filled the clearing. From the portal strode a group of devils in ornate, garish armor, their Eater, a man with fiery orange hair and a sneer permanently etched on his face. Still trying to sweet-talk your way to power, Rias? The leader mocked, his voice grating. Some of us prefer a more direct approach. The House of Furnius does not beg for power. We take it. He ignored Rias completely, turning his attention to Naruto. You, beast, your little patch of dirt now belongs to us. Submit, and you will be granted the honor of becoming a slave to a noble house. Resist, and we will burn your forest to the ground and take your power from your corpse. Rias's face went pale with fury. Diodora, this is Grimoire business. Not anymore, Diodora sneered. He raised a hand, and a massive sphere of crackling, demonic energy formed above him. Let me demonstrate how true nobles handle acquisitions. He launched the attack, a meteor of destructive power aimed not at Naruto, but at the center of the clearing, where Mito and the centaurs were scrambling to react. It was an attack meant to utter the weak to prove a point to the strong. Saria raised her lance, bellowing a challenge, ready to charge to a futile death. Mito's hands were a blur of signs, a complex sealing array glowing on the ground before her. Kuroka had vanished, no doubt preparing to strike from the shadows. Rias and her peerage braced themselves, preparing to defend their own honor. They were all too slow. They were all unnecessary. Naruto raised one hand, palm open. The sphere of demonic energy, a raging storm of chaos and destruction, simply stopped. It hung in the air, a few feet from his hand, its violent crackling sputtering into silence. The raw, untamed energy within it was not blocked or deflected. It was pacified. Diodora's sneer froze on his face. Naruto slowly closed his fingers into a fist. The sphere of energy imploded. Not with a bang, but with a soft sigh. It collapsed in on itself, folding into a tiny point of light that then winked out of existence. He had not countered the magic. He had told it to stop, and it had obeyed. Silence descended upon the clearing. It was a heavy, profound silence, filled with the dawning, terrifying realization of everyone present. Rias and her peerage stared, their minds unable to process what they had just seen. Demonic power was a fundamental force, an expression of will. It could be blocked, it could be overpowered, but it could not be unmade with a simple gesture. It was like watching a man command the tide to stop, and seeing the ocean obey. Naruto finally stood up from his living throne. For the first time, everyone felt the full, unshielded weight of his presence. It wasn't an aura that could be measured or quantified. It was a change in the state of reality around him. The air grew clearer. The light of the forest brightened. The V.R.E. ground seemed to thrum with his power. He looked at Diodora and the Furnius devils, and for the first time, his golden eyes held something other than calm observation. It was not anger. It was a deep, profound disappointment. the look of a creator gazing upon a flaw in his creation. You are not welcome here. His voice was a quiet thought in their minds, but it hit with the force of a physical blow. He flicked his wrist, a gesture one might use to shoo away an insect. The violent, purple tear in reality that the furnace devils had used to arrive suddenly roared to life behind them. It became a vortex, a swirling maw of dimensional energy that pulled with irresistible force. They screamed, their arrogant posturing dissolving into pure terror as they were lifted from their feet. They rabbled for purchase on a reality that no longer recognized their right to be there. What is this? What are you? Diodora shrieked as he was pulled backward into the swirling chaos. His questions were swallowed by the void. The portal snapped shut, severing his scream, leaving behind only a perfect, unbroken silence. Naruto's gaze, holding the light of distant nebulae, turned to Rias Grimori. She stood frozen, her carefully constructed world of politics, power levels, and hierarchies utterly shattered. She had come here with a devil's bargain, prepared to negotiate for a powerful piece to put on her chessboard. Instead, she had found the board itself. I am not a piece to be played in your games, his voice echoed, gentle but absolute. This is my home. Those who come in peace are welcome to its shade. Those who come with ambition will leave with nothing but the knowledge of their own insignificance. Rias looked at the man before her. He was not a beast to be tamed. He was not an anomaly to be recruited. He was a king, a god, something entirely new. Her ambition, which had burned so brightly moments before, was extinguished, replaced by a feeling she had not truly felt since she was a small child. Awe. Pure, undiluted, terrifying awe. She lowered her head and gave a deep, formal bow, no longer as a politician, but as a supplicant. We understand, she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. We will trouble you no further. Her mission was a failure, but her journey had just truly begun. She had sought power, and she had found a truth that would change her forever. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Whispering Ruins. Rias Grimori and her peerage had not left. They had been offered the shade of the Silver Forest, and they had accepted. Their position, however, had fundamentally changed. They were no longer ambassadors from a great power seeking to recruit an asset. They were guests in a land ruled by a force they could not comprehend, watching a world being born around them. Issei, humbled and terrified, had stopped making lecherous comments entirely, instead spending his days trying to wrap his head around a power that made his boosted gear feel like a child's toy. Kiba trained relentlessly with the Centaur warriors, his knightly grace a stark contrast to their raw, four-legged power. Akeno watched Naruto with a curious, analytical smile, her usual playful sadism replaced by a genuine, almost academic, fascination. And Rias observed. She watched how Naruto's mere presence seemed to guide the growth of the forest, how his silent will was instantly understood by Kuroka and Saria, and how the pragmatic, sharp-witted Mito Uzumaki was already sketching out the foundations of a civilization based on his power. She was witnessing the birth of a myth. This morning, however, was different. Naruto sat on his living throne, his eyes closed. The usual, vibrant thrum of life that pulsed through Arborea was constant, a symphony to which he was the conductor. But for the past hour, he had felt a discordant note. A void, a small, localized patch of nothing. It was a spot within his own domain where the song of life went silent, a patch of static in the broadcast of his will. He stood, the motion so fluid it was like watching water rise. Every head in the central clearing turned to him. Saria, who was overseeing the construction of a training ground, trotted over instantly. My lord, quote, there is a sickness in the land. To the east, his thought resonated, calm but carrying an undeniable weight of purpose. A place the forest will not touch. He began to walk, his pace unhurried, yet covering the ground with an effortless speed. Curiosity piqued. Rias and her peerage exchanged a look and followed, keeping a respectful distance. Saria took up a position at his flank, her hand resting on the pommel of her sword, while Kuroka materialized from a shadow on his other side, her senses on high alert. Mito, seeing the procession, grabbed a satchel of scrolls and hurried to catch up. Her expression one of intense scholarly interest. They walked for an hour, deeper into the territory he was still in the process of shaping. The land around them began to change. The vibrant, Silver-leafed trees grew thinner, more sparse. The ground became barren, shifting from rich soil to cracked, gray stone. The air grew still and cold, and the life-giving energy that permeated the rest of Arborea was absent here. It was a dead zone. At its center was a hill, not a natural formation, but a man-made or not man-made mound, overgrown with what little tough, wiry grass could survive here. At its peak, a circle of black, monolithic stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. They were carved with patterns that were not quite kanji, not quite ceiling arrays, but something older. More geometric, more alien. They hummed with a faint, dissonant energy that made the hairs on one's arm stand on end. Incredible, Mito breathed, her eyes wide as shish. He ran a hand over the surface of one of the monoliths. The craftsmanship, this predates the Sage of Six Paths. It predates any known civilization. This is from the dawn of the world. Naruto ignored the stones. His attention was fixed on the center of the circle, where a set of stone stairs led down into the darkness of the earth. The silence was coming from down there. Without hesitation, he descended. The air grew colder, heavy with the weight of forgotten ages. The stone steps were worn smooth by the passage of millennia. They opened into a massive, circular chamber, its ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. The only light came from the faint, sickly luminescence of the seals that covered every surface. They were vast, complex, interwoven patterns that pulsed with a slow, tired rhythm, like a dying heart. In the very center of the chamber, the floor sloped down into a shallow basin. And in the basin sat a pool of perfectly clear, gelatinous liquid. It was a slime, roughly the size of a large dog. It quivered slightly. A single, large bubble rising to its surface and popping with a soft plip. It seemed utterly harmless, almost pitiable in this vast, oppressive chamber. As Naruto stepped closer, the slime quivered more intensely. It was not a reaction of fear. It was recognition. It began to flow toward him, a slow, viscous puddle of crystal clarity. It is a guardian, Naruto's thought voice stated. A simple observation. A guardian for what? Kiba asked, his hand on his sword. Naruto didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the massive, crumbling seal on the floor beneath the slime. It was the epicenter of the entire complex, the lock on a door he was only just beginning to perceive. He reached out a hand, not to touch it, but to feel the power radiating from it. The moment his chakra touched the edge of the array, the chamber screamed. It was a silent, psychic scream that bypassed their ears and slammed directly into their minds. The tired, pulsing light of the seals flared into a blinding, frantic strobing. The world dissolved, and they were all plunged into a vision. It was not a memory. It was a raw, unfiltered data stream of cosmic terror. Flash. A sky of burning galaxies. Pale-skinned figures in white robes. Otsutsuki, fleeing not with arrogance, but with abject terror on their faces. They were not hunters. They were prey. Flash. Their pursuers. Beings of impossible geometry. Shapes that folded in on themselves, angles that did not exist. Colors that screamed. They were not creatures of flesh and blood, but living, malevolent concepts that warped reality around them. The echoes of ruin. Flash. A planet, young and vibrant, perhaps this very world, long ago. A coalition of Otsutsuki and a clan of red-haired humans with powerful, swirling seals on their robes. Uzumaki. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to contain. A desperate, last-ditch effort. Flash. The construction of the seal. A great sacrifice. Dozens of Uzumaki masters pouring their own life force into the array, their bodies turning to dust as the final lines were drawn. They were not imprisoning a monster. They were suturing a wound in the very fabric of existence. Flash. The final image. The seal flaring to life, the echo of ruin within it not raging, but simply, waiting. And a warning, not in words, but in a wave of pure, conceptual dread. If the seal breaks, it will not be an escape. It will be an unmaking. The vision shattered, and they were back in the chamber, gasping for breath, clutching their heads. Issei was on the ground, pale and shaking. Saria was breathing heavily, her warrior's mind struggling to comprehend an enemy that couldn't be fought with a lance. Rias was staring at the seal, her face a mask of horrified understanding. The politica, squabbles of her world seemed like petty playground games in the face of this. This was a threat on a cosmological scale. The slime, which they now understood to be the last, living battery for the failing seal, wobbled pitifully. It had been holding this line, alone, for eons. It was almost spent. By the first sage, a new voice gasped from the stairwell. They all turned. Mito stood there, her face ashen. One hand braced against the wall for support. A scroll had fallen from her satchel, its contents spilling across the stone floor. She was staring at the central seal, her eyes wide with a mixture of professional reverence and absolute terror. "I felt it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A surge from a primeval Uzumaki array. I never thought I'd see one in person. They are legends. Theoretical constructs from our oldest texts." She stumbled forward, her eyes tracing the decaying lines of light on the floor. "This isn't a prison, Naruto. This is a cosmic anchor. The Uzumaki of the Dawn Age didn't just create barriers. They wrote the laws of reality for a given space. This seal isn't just locking something up. It's actively telling reality that the thing inside it cannot exist here. And it's failing." She pointed a shaking finger at a section of the array where the light was flickering like a dying candle. "Your presence, your power, it's too much for the already weakened structure. You're like a star being brought too close to a fragile glass sculpture. You're accelerating its decay just by being here." The slime, whom they now saw with new eyes, flowed over to Naruto's feet. It gently nudged his leg, a simple, desperate plea for help. It could feel his life force, a veritable ocean compared to its own dwindling pond. It had done its duty for longer than civilizations had existed. It was tired. Naruto looked down at the simple creature. He then looked at the seal, his golden eyes seeing past the lines of energy, past the stone, to the conceptual horror locked within. He understood. The Otsutsuki were not the apex predators of the multiverse. They were just the ones who had survived the last extinction event by locking the true monsters away. And now, one of the cages was breaking. The looming subplot was no longer looming. It was here, pulsing beneath his feet, a time bomb that he had inadvertently started ticking faster. He had created a sanctuary from the ashes of a human war, only to discover it was built on the lid of a cosmic one. He knelt, placing a hand on the clear, gelatinous body of the slime. He didn't speak. He simply let a sliver of his own monumental life force flow into it. The slime, whom he now named Su, pulsed with a grateful, brilliant light, its form becoming more solid, more vibrant. It had found a new anchor, a new source of life. It clung to him, its ancient duty fulfilled, its new purpose found. The choice was not his to make. The responsibility was now his to bear. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Echoes of a Friend. The discovery beneath the ruins had changed the atmosphere in Arborea. A quiet solemnity had settled over its leaders. Mito Uzumaki was now in a state of frenzied, focused research, her days spent poring over ancient texts she summoned from storage seals, trying to understand the mechanics of the primeval array. Rias and her peerage, once powerful nobles from a proud dimension, now felt like child. Ren, who had stumbled into a library containing the secrets of creation and apocalypse. They helped where they could, their demonic magic a surprisingly useful tool for deciphering some of the more esoteric energy signatures. But they were acutely aware they were out of their depth. Naruto spent most of his time in the chamber of the seal, with Su now a constant, silent companion. He was not trying to fix the seal. Mito had warned that a direct infusion of his immense power would shatter it instantly. Instead, he was listening. He was extending his senses, feeling the slow, inexorable decay of the ancient Uzumaki work. Trying to understand the nature of the lock before he even considered the key. He could feel the thing on the other side. It wasn't angry. It wasn't evil. It was simply other. A being of impossible, chaotic potential that the ordered universe had no room for. It was during one of these quiet, meditative vigils that he felt a familiar presence at the edge of his domain. It was a chakra signature he knew as well as his own, a crackling mix of lightning and ice, of profound loss and fierce, lonely pride. Sasuke Uchiha had come. Naruto was already standing at the board. Of his silver forest when Sasuke arrived. He didn't walk through the plains but flickered into existence with his Rinnegan's teleportation, a swirl of space and a crack of displaced air. He stood 100 yards away. His single arm at his side, his dark cloak billowing in a wind that didn't seem to touch Naruto at all. His eyes, one a deep onyx, the other the familiar violet ripple of the Rinnegan, were fixed on his old friend. He looked different. The war-torn fatigue had been replaced by a grim, settled resolve. But beneath it, Naruto could feel the turmoil. Sasuke had not come for a casual visit. Naruto. Sasuke's voice was the same as always, low and devoid of unnecessary emotion, yet it carried across the distance as if he were standing right next to him. Sasuke. Naruto's reply was a calm thought. A ripple in the stillness between them. The 5 Kage sent me, Sasuke stated, getting straight to the point. They are afraid. The entire elemental nations are afraid. Your chakra. It can be felt from the land of iron to the farthest shores of the land of water. It feels like the sky is pressing down on all of us. They don't understand what you've become. Do you? The question hung in the air. Sasuke's jaw tightened. I understand that you have the power of the 10 tails inside you. A power that Kagaya and Madara were consumed by. A power that is not meant for one man to wield. He took a step forward. His gaze intense. This kingdom you're building. This forest. It's an act of separation. You're drawing a line between yourself and the world. The world that we fought to save. The world I saved is welcome here, Naruto countered, his thought voice unwavering. But its systems, its wars, its endless cycles of hatred, they have no place in Arborea. And what gives you the right to make that decision? Sasuke's voice rose, a flicker of the old, passionate anger breaking through his calm facade. To declare yourself king and set yourself above everyone else. We were supposed to change the world together. From within, not by abandoning it. You tried to change the world with a revolution of force, Naruto reminded him gently. I am offering a revolution of principle. A sanctuary for those tired of the old ways. It's a cult built around your power. Sasuke shot back, taking another step. They see you as a god, Naruto. Don't you see the danger in that? The same arrogance that corrupted Madara, that corrupted Kagaya. I am not them, Naruto interrupted, his voice for the first time carrying a hint of steel. Their power was a tool for their ambition. This power is me. There is no separation. This was the core of their disagreement. Sasuke saw the 10 tails as a weapon Naruto was wielding. He couldn't comprehend that Naruto was the weapon, and the wielder, and the will behind it. All at once. To him, this was a problem that needed a solution. A dangerous variable that had to be controlled. Come back, Naruto. Sasuke's voice softened, becoming a plea. Come back to Konoha. Let the best seal masters, let the Uzumaki girl you have here, help you. We can separate the Biju. We can put this power back in its box. You can be a hero again. Not this. He gestured to the silent, otherworldly forest around them. Naruto's golden eyes held a profound sadness. Sasuke was his brother, the other half of his soul. But that soul had been reforged. And Sasuke was still looking at the ghost of the boy he once knew. You are asking me to cripple myself for the comfort of others. You are asking me to be less than what I am, because what I am frightens you. Sasuke's face hardened. He had hoped for reason. He had hoped the friend he knew was still in there, buried beneath all that power. Now he saw that there was only one language left that they both truly, deeply understood. If you won't listen to reason, Sasuke said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone, then I will make you listen. His Rinnegan flared. The air around him crackled with lightning. He didn't wait for a response. He moved. One moment he was 100 yards away, the next he was right in front of Naruto, his hand, sheathed in a crackling chidori, aimed directly at Naruto's heart. It was a blow meant to incapacitate, to shock the system, to force a reaction. Naruto didn't move. He didn't even blink. The chidori, a jutsu capable of punching through steel, fizzled out an inch from his chest. The lightning dissipated, the piercing sound dying with a pathetic whimper. It was not blocked by a barrier. The chakra that formed the technique simply came apart, its structure collapsing under the sheer oppressive presence of Naruto's own life force. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock. He leapt back, putting distance between them, his mind racing. It wasn't a jutsu. It was a passive effect. Like standing too close to the sun. If that's how it is, Sasuke growled, and a colossal, purple ribcage of energy erupted around him. Susanoo. The skeletal warrior began to form. Muscle and sinew weaving themselves from pure chakra. It grew to its full, monstrous height, a terrifying avatar of Uchiha power, its spectral blade crackling with Amaterasu's black flames. The ground shook under its might. From the border of the forest, Saria and the other centaurs watched in horror, their own strength feeling utterly insignificant in the face of such a titan. The Susanoo drew back its sword, preparing for a strike that could cleave a mountain in two. Naruto looked up at the glowing purple god, his expression unchanging. He slowly raised his right hand. He didn't create a Biju avatar. He didn't summon a Rasenshuriken the size of a meteor. He just held up his hand. From the ground around him, 1,000 silver roots, each as thick as a bridge tower, erupted from the earth. They were not violent. They moved with a slow, inexorable purpose, like the limbs of a waking leviathan. They rose into the air, weaving around the Susanoo, not attacking it, but simply caging it. More and more roots emerged, wrapping around its arms, its legs, its torso, until the glowing purple warrior was completely encased in a sphere of living, silver wood. The black flames of Amaterasu licked at the roots, but they did not burn. The wood simply absorbed the chakra, the flames guttering out as if starved of fuel. The Susanoo strained against the cage, its immense strength meeting an unyielding, life-sapping force. Sasuke, inside the construct's head, poured more and more of his chakra into it, his face contorted with effort. The Susanoo pushed, its chakra flaring, but the sphere of roots simply grew thicker. Denser, absorbing every ounce of power he threw at it. He was a fly caught in the sap of an ancient tree. Finally, with a groan that was both metaphysical and auditory, the Susanoo flickered and died. Its chakra completely drained. The sphere of roots gently lowered the exhausted Uchiha to the ground, then receded back into the earth as if it had never been there. Sasuke stood alone on the plain, panting, his chakra reserves dangerously low. He was defeated, not in a battle, but in a simple contest of existence. His ultimate power was nothing more than a mild annoyance to the force Naruto now commanded. The chasm between them was no longer a difference in skill or power levels. It was a difference in species. Naruto walked forward, his footsteps silent on the grass. He stopped in front of his friend, his brother. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked sad. "Go home, Sasuke," his voice was gentle in Sasuke's mind. "Tell them to stop being afraid. Tell them the age of shinobi is over. A new age is beginning. And it does not require their approval." He reached out and gently tapped Sasuke's forehead with 2 fingers, the way Itachi once had. It was a gesture of finality, of affection, and of farewell. Sasuke stared at him, the full, crushing weight of their severed bond finally settling in his heart. He had not come here to fight a monster. He had come to beg a god to pretend he was still a man. And he had failed. Without another word, Sasuke Uchiha turned and, with the last of his strength, warped himself away, leaving Naruto to the silence of his kingdom. The last echo of his old life was gone. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Forging a Matriarchy. Arborea was no longer a mere sanctuary, it was becoming a state. Under Mito Uzumaki's relentless drive, the central clearing was transforming into a nascent town. The architecture was a fusion of practicality and Naruto's unique power. Buildings were not constructed so much as coaxed from the earth and wood. Smooth, white stone floors rose to meet walls of woven, silver-barked timber that shimmered with a soft, internal light. There was a communal dining hall, barracks for Serei's growing centaur guard, and a central tower that served as Mito's workshop, its rooms already overflowing with scrolls, maps, and half-finished ceiling arrays. The society taking shape was just as unique. Centaurs. Their initial martial austerity softened by a sense of security they hadn't known in generations, worked alongside Rias's peerage. Kiba and Issei, stripped of their usual arrogance, found a rising camaraderie in learning basic construction seals from Mito. Akano, ever curious, spent her time studying the unique flora, discovering that the fruits of the silver trees could rapidly replenish both chakra and demonic energy. It was a delicate, unprecedented piece. And it was about to be tested. The trouble began, as it often does, with a problem of justice. The rogue shinobi Naruto had neutralized weeks ago were still being held, their chakra continuously suppressed by the living roots of the forest. They were a loose end, a question the burgeoning kingdom had yet to answer. The discussion took place in the central tower, a round chamber with open archways that looked out over the growing settlement. It was the first time they had all gathered as a council. The problem is simple, Kuroka stated, pacing restlessly, her twin tails twitching with irritation. She was perched on a window ledge, her form silhouetted against the morning light. They are a security risk. They attacked our people. They are unrepentant. A quick, clean death is the most efficient solution. NYA. Across the room, Saria slammed her fist on the large, wooden table at the chamber's center. Absolutely not. We are not butchers. They are defeated combatants. They must be given a trial, judged for their crimes, and sentenced accordingly. It is the honorable way. Kuroka snorted, a flash of disdain in her yellow eyes. Honorable. Wasting resources to feed and house assassins who would slit your throat for a bag of Ryo. That isn't honor, Saria. It's sentimentality. A weakness we cannot afford. A kingdom without a code of laws is just a den of beasts. Saria retorted, her voice booming with conviction. Power must be tempered by justice, or we are no better than the tyrants who drove my people from our homeland. Rias, who had been observing the debate with the cool detachment of a seasoned politician, steepled her fingers. Perhaps there is a third option, she interjected smoothly. They are shinobi, yes. Skilled, if undisciplined. They could be re-educated. Offered a place in my peerage as pawns. Their loyalty could be magically ensured. They would become assets. Mito, hunched over a map of the territory, didn't even look up. Impractical, she said, her voice sharp. The energy required to create new evil pieces is substantial. Furthermore, integrating a dozen resentful, Urally alien individuals into a command structure requires logistical and social support we don't have. And frankly, I don't trust your, magically ensured, loyalty any more than I trust a rusty kunai. My dear, you speak of devils as if we are mere brutes, Rias replied, a hint of ice in her tone. Our system of contracts and peerages has maintained stability in the underworld for millennia. The underworld is not Arborea. Mito shot back, finally looking up, her red eyes flashing. We are not building a noble house based on ancient, esoteric pacts. We are building a nation from scratch. We need functional, transparent systems. Not a magically enforced feudalism. The argument spiraled, their voices rising. Kuroka's cold pragmatism clashed with Saray's rigid honor. Rias's aristocratic realpolitik grated against Mito's data-driven logic. They were four brilliant, powerful women, but their life experiences were so wildly different that they couldn't find a common language. They were Ying to build a single house with four completely different sets of blueprints. Throughout it all, Naruto sat on his throne, which had been moved to the head of the chamber. Su, the clear slime, rested at his feet, quivering slightly at the discordant emotions filling the room. He listened, his golden Rinne Sharingan spinning slowly, taking in every argument, every perspective. He was not just hearing their words. He was feeling the core beliefs that shaped them. Kuroka's ruthlessness was born from a life of being hunted. Saray's honor was the anchor that had held her clan together through exile. Rias's political maneuvering was the tool she used to survive in a society of ambitious demons. Mito's rigid practicality was the shield of a woman who had seen firsthand how chaotic, emotional decisions could lead to ruin. Finally, when the argument had reached a fever pitch, he raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. Every eye in the room turned to him. The sheer weight of his presence effortlessly commanded their attention. You are all correct, his voice resonated in their minds, calm and clear as a deep pool. The statement caught all of them off guard. He looked at Kuroka. You were right, Kuroka. They are a threat. To ignore that would be foolish. He then turned his gaze to Saria. And you were right, Saria. How we treat our defeated enemies defines who we are. To resort to murder, when it is not necessary, is to embrace the darkness we claim to oppose. His eyes met Rias's. Your perspective is also valid, Rias. Wasted potential is a cardinal sin. Every being has the capacity for change and purpose. Finally, he looked at Mito. And you, Mito, are the bedrock. Without a practical, sustainable foundation, all our ideals are just words on the wind. He stood, walking to the center of the room. Su flowed after him, a loyal, living shadow. You are arguing about what to do to them, he continued, his thought voice taking on a new depth. Punish them, execute them, enslave them, imprison them. You are all looking at them as objects to be managed. You have forgotten to look at them as men. He turned and walked toward one of the open archways, his gaze sweeping over the burgeoning town below. Here is my judgment. We will not kill them. We will not imprison them. We will not force them into servitude. Saria looked confused. Kuroka looked incredulous. I will go to them, Naruto declared. And I will offer them a choice. I will remove the seals that bind them. I will return their weapons. They will be free to walk out of this forest and never return. We will not stop them. Their old lives, their hatred, their blood-soaked ways, they can have them back. My lord, that's insane. Saria burst out. They will simply return with reinforcements. Or, Naruto continued, his voice overriding her protest. They can choose to stay. If they stay, they will owe a debt. Not to me, not to a code of laws, but to the community they attacked. They will work. They will help build these walls. They will help cultivate these fields. They will use the hands that once held weapons against us to create a home for the people they tried to harm. Their sentence is not punishment. It is atonement. When their debt is paid, when they have contributed more than they tried to take, they will be free to join our society as full members or leave with their honor restored. The chamber was silent. The four women stared at him, their own arguments suddenly seeming small, one-dimensional. His solution was elegant. It was merciful, satisfying Saray's need for justice. It was efficient, neutralizing the threat without bloodshed, which appealed to Kuroka's pragmatism. It transformed a liability into a potential asset, echoing Rias's goals. And it was a practical, self-sustaining system that required minimal resources, which resonated with Mito's logic. But more than that, it was a profound statement of philosophy. It was a solution built on faith in the capacity for change. A belief that even broken men could be remade. It wasn't the justice of a shinobi, a devil, a knight, or an engineer. It was the justice of a god who had once been a lonely, hated boy. It is a worthy judgment, my lord, Saria finally said, her voice filled with a reverence that went beyond mere loyalty. She bowed her head. Kuroka just shook her head, a slow, grudging smile on her face. You're a strange man, boss. Nya. It was a moment of perfect unity. A new foundation for their kingdom, built not on compromise, but on a higher synthesis of their ideals, all guided by his hand. They were not just his followers. They were his matriarchy, a council forged in fire and debate, made stronger by their differences. And it was in that perfect, triumphant moment that the universe screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic shockwave that emanated from a dimension beyond their own, a broadcast of pure, divine arrogance that washed over their entire world. Naruto stiffened, his head snapping up. Rias cried out and stumbled, clutching her temples. Even Saria felt it, a cold dread that had nothing to do with physical fear. A vision was seared into their minds. They saw the faces of the 5 Kage, Tsunade, Gaara, the Raikage, the Mizukage, the Tsuchikage, their expressions a mixture of shock and terror. Before them stood a projection of a being, a pale, celestial figure floating in a void of cold stars. It was a herald of the Otsutsuki progenitor, grander and more powerful than the scout Naruto had unmade. The herald's voice was not sound, but a direct, imperious command imprinted on the soul of every sentient being in the elemental nations. Hear this, mortals of this tainted world. The entity you know as Naruto Uzumaki is a cosmic perversion, a cancerous growth upon the divine tree of life. Its existence is an affront to the sacred order maintained by the progenitor, the true god of this universe. The vision showed the faces of shinobi across the continent, looking to the sky in fear. We have offered it a chance to be cleansed. It has refused. Therefore, we offer you a choice. Sever all ties to the abomination. Declare it your enemy. Aid us in its purification. Do this, and your world will be spared. Continue to harbor it, associate with it, or even acknowledge its sovereignty, and your entire planet will be deemed a part of the cancer. And it will be purged accordingly. The psychic broadcast ended, but the chilling weight of the ultimatum remained, a poison seeping into the consciousness of the world. The 4 women in the council chamber stared at Naruto. Their internal squabbles, their debate about a dozen rogue shinobi, felt like a child's game from a lifetime ago. Sasuke's plea for Naruto to return now seemed like a desperate, naive hope. The Shinobi Alliance, their old home, had just been given an impossible choice: declare war on Naruto, or face the wrath of a god. They were an island. The message was clear: the entire world was now their enemy, whether by choice or by coercion. Mito was the first to speak, her voice steady, all traces of the earlier argument gone. Our food and water stores will last 6 months. Our defensive perimeter is strong, but not impenetrable against a global assault. My clan is ready to fight and die, my lord, Saria stated, her hand gripping her sword, her eyes blazing with fierce loyalty. Kuroka simply melted back into the shadows, a silent promise that any enemy who approached would find a dagger in their back. Rias stepped forward, her face pale but her eyes resolved. She looked at Naruto, no longe. R is a politician sizing up a powerful piece, but as a follower looking to her king. You have our power, she said, speaking for her entire peerage. To the very end, the test had come. Their newfound unity, their fledgling matriarchy, was about to be baptized in a fire that threatened to consume the world. They all looked to Naruto, their anchor in the coming storm. His expression was calm, his cosmic eyes looking not at the fear in the room, but through the veil of reality, towards the arrogant god who had just declared war on his home. And for the first time, they saw a truly dangerous I'd ignite in the depths of those starry eyes. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Divine Purge. The silence was the worst part. The Otsutsuki progenitors' ultimatum had fallen upon the elemental nations like a shroud. And the world had responded with a deafening, terrified quiet. No armies massed at Arboria's borders. No diplomatic communiques arrived. The shinobi villages, caught between a new god, the wife feared, and an old one that promised annihilation, were paralyzed. They were watching, waiting to see which titan would strike first. Inside Arborea, the silence was filled with the hum of preparation. It was a kingdom on a war footing. Saray's voice was a constant, sharp bark in the training fields, drilling the centaur warriors and a new volunteer corps, including a surprisingly disciplined I and Kiba, in coordinated defense tactics. Mito's central tower glowed day and night as she and her Uzumaki apprentices laid down continent-spanning defensive arrays, turning the very soil of their Me into a layered shield of sealing arts. Kuroka was a ghost, a flicker in the shadows at the edge of the world, her reports appearing on Naruto's throne as if by magic, detailing the world's fear and indecision. They were preparing for a war on the ground, for an attack from the nations they had once called home. But Naruto's gaze was fixed on the sky. He sat on his living throne, the concerns of a planetary war seeming small. Provincial. He could feel the shinobi world's fear, but it was a distant echo. The true threat was not behind him, in his past. It was above him, in the cold, silent void. He was the target, and he knew the progenitor would not rely on mortal proxies to deal with a cosmic problem. Rias found him there as the sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the silver forest. We've received no word, she said, her voice tight with tension. Gaara has sealed the borders of Suna. The Raikage has recalled all his shinobi. They're isolating themselves, isolating us. They are not the enemy. Naruto's thought voice replied, his golden eyes never leaving the heavens. They are the battlefield. The first strike will not come from them. As if summoned by his words, it happened. The sky tore open. There was no sound, no explosion. It was a silent, geometric wound, a perfect circle of blackness appearing in the heavens, blotting out the stars. From this void, a light descended. It was not the gentle light of the sun or the harsh light of a jutsu. It was a pure, golden, clinical light, the light of a divine operating theater. It solidified, taking a that was both beautiful and utterly alien. It was a crystalline being, a shifting kaleidoscope of perfect, interlocking geometric shapes. It had no face, no limbs in the conventional sense, only a central, pulsating core of blinding light and 1,000 spinning, golden rings that hummed with a low, vibrational frequency. It was not a warrior. It was a weapon of cosmic law, a living concept of erasure. A purifier. Its presence was a violation. The vibrant life of Arborea recoiled from it. The leaves of the silver trees seemed to fade, the clear water of the rivers grew cloudy. The very laws of physics seemed to grow thin and weak beneath its gaze. It did not radiate hate or anger. It radiated correction. It attacked. A beam of pure, conceptual energy, not light or heat, but a focused ray of unbeing, shot from its core. It struck a swath of the silver forest at the edge of the valley. There was no explosion, no fire, no sound of splintering wood. The trees, the earth, the very air and the beam's path simply ceased to exist. It left behind a perfectly smooth, sterile, glassy scar on the landscape, a place where reality had been surgically excised. The battle had begun. To arms. Saray's war cry was instantaneous. A roar of defiance against the impossible. She galloped to the front of her assembled troops, her lance a silver needle against the descending god weapon. Archers, volley. Ground troops, charge. Hundreds of chakra-infused arrows streaked towards the purifier. Saria and a vanguard of 100 centaur knights charged across the plain, the ground shaking under their hooves, their lances leveled. A wave of mortal fury against a divine absolute. It was utterly futile. The arrows vaporized 100 feet from the purifier, their energy deconstructed into harmless particles. As the centaurs charged, a frictionless field of force emanated from the celestial being. Their hooves found no purchase, their charge dissolving into a chaotic, sliding mess. Their lances, thrust with the force to shatter castle walls, simply glanced off the invisible field, their momentum turned against them. From the central tower, Akano Himahima rose into the air on black feathered wings, her expression grim. Let's see how it likes this. Holy lightning. A massive bolt of golden energy, a fusion of holy power and demonic lightning, crashed down from the sky. It struck the purifier dead center. For a moment, it was engulfed. Then, the celestial being simply absorbed it. The light of the lightning was drawn into its crystalline structure, processed, and nullified in less than a second. This was not a fight. It was an execution. Then, a new voice entered the fray, calm, absolute, and touching the mind of every defender at once. Naruto's. It is a being of pure order. Raw power is useless. It processes and negates. We will not fight it with power. We will fight it with chaos. Mito. High in her tower, Mito slammed her palms onto a massive, glowing seal matrix. Prim. Defensive array. Law of Sanctuary, activate. The ground of the entire valley floor lit up with a colossal network of glowing blue seals. The air, which had felt thin and weak, suddenly grew thick and heavy. The wavering laws of physics snapped back into place, anchored by the Uzumaki seals. The purifier, which had floated with effortless grace, suddenly seemed heavier, its movements a fraction more deliberate. It was no longer in a neutral environment. It was in their world, bound by their rules. Saria, you are the storm. Your target is not its body, but its attention. Be everywhere. Do not let it rest. Saria, recovering from the failed charge, understood instantly. Archers, coordinated volleys. Pincer formations. Do not engage directly. Harass and withdraw. Move. The centaurs, given a clear, achievable objective, moved with renewed purpose, their arrows and fainting charges becoming a constant, stinging distraction that forced the purifier to divert a portion of its focus. Rias, Akano, your power is a paradox. Demonic and holy, chaos and order in one. That is the one language this thing does not speak. Do not aim for its core. Aim for the rings. Disrupt its harmony. Scream at it. Rias and Akano met in the sky, their hands clasping. Ready, my friend? Rias asked, a determined fire in her eyes. Let's give this thing a headache, President, Akano replied with a feral grin. They poured their power together. Rias's crimson power of destruction, the very essence of chaotic erasure, intertwined with Akano's golden holy lightning. The result was not a blend, but a violent, screaming vortex of paradoxical energy, a shrieking purple gold tempest that defied all logic. They unleashed it not as a single bolt, but as a continuous, lashing whip of energy. The purifier, for the first time, reacted. The whip of chaotic energy struck the spinning golden rings, and they stuttered. The perfect, harmonic hum of the being faltered, replaced by a discordant screech. The attack wasn't destroying the rings, but it was confusing them, disrupting the perfect, ordered state of their existence. The purifier was forced to divert more of its power to stabilize itself. It was wounded, conceptually. Kuroka, You were the flaw in the diamond. Go. While the purifier was distracted, a shadow detached itself from the base of the central tower. Kuroka, cloaked in senjutsu that render her almost invisible to even divine senses, flickered through space. She appeared for a microsecond on the crystalline body of the purifier itself, her claws, glowing with a sickly green tuki, scoring a tiny, almost invisible seal onto its surface. She vanished before it could react. She appeared again on the other side, carving another. She was a ghost, a whisper, placing tiny, malicious pieces of graffiti on a perfect statue. Each one a minuscule disruption in its internal energy flow. Su, become what we need. The purifier, enraged by the constant harassment and the gnawing disruption, focused its energy for another major attack. Its central core began to glow, promising a blast of unmaking far larger than the first, aimed directly at Mito's tower. At Naruto's feet, the clear slime, Su, surged forward. It flowed across the battlefield, rising up like a wave and transforming. Its gelatinous body solidified, taking on a perfect, mirrored sheen. It formed a colossal, concave shield directly in the path of the beam. The beam of erasure struck the shield, and was reflected. The purifier was struck by its own power. The effect was catastrophic. Its ordered form could not process its own disordered, reflected attack. A massive crack appeared across its crystalline body. It emitted a silent, psychic scream of pain and confusion. It was damaged. It was vulnerable. Now, Naruto moved. He had been the conductor, the central mind guiding the symphony of battle. Now, he would be the crescendo. He formed a single-hand seal. Ram. Arborea is my body, his thought echoed, not just to his council, but to the land itself. The forest is my flesh. The stone is my bone. Rise. The entire valley floor began to move. The ground itself buckled and shifted. Silver trees uprooted themselves, their roots weaving together like muscle fibers. Boulders and earth flowed like liquid, forming massive limbs. The entire kingdom, the physical manifestation of his will, rose from the earth. It became a colossal golem of silver wood and living stone, a titan the size of a mountain, with Naruto standing in a hollow at its heart, his golden eyes glowing with unimaginable power. This living mountain, this kingdom made flesh, reached out. Its massive hand, woven from 1,000 ancient trees, did not swat or crush the wounded purifier. It gently, inexorably, closed around it. The purifier struggled, its light flaring. But it was trapped. The silver wood, saturated with the primal life force of the 10 tails and the chaotic adaptability of Suo's essence, was its perfect antithesis. It was the answer of chaotic, unbridled life to the question of sterile, ordered death. The wood did not crush the purifier. It absorbed it. The golden light of the celestial being was drawn out, its div in energy unraveled and pulled into the lifeblood of the forest. Its form dissolved, its geometric shapes coming apart, its ordered essence recycled into the chaotic, vibrant life of Arborea. The light faded, and the purifier was gone, its power becoming just another nutrient for the soil. The battle was over. The colossal golem of earth and wood crumbled, its components settling back into their natural places with a deep, final groan. The forest was whole again. The sterile scar left by the purifier's first attack was already being reclaimed, new silver saplings pushing their way through the glassy ground. In the center of the valley, the defenders of Arborea stood, exhausted but alive. Saria leaned heavily on her lance, her armor dented, her warriors wounded but their spirits unbroken. Mito had collapsed to her knees in her tower, the strain of maintaining the anchor seals finally overwhelming her. Rias and Akino descended from the sky, supporting each other, their energy reserves utterly spent. Naruto stood calmly amidst them all, the overwhelming power receding back into his human form. He looked at the faces of his council, his matriarchy, streaked with dirt and sweat, their bodies pushed to their absolute limit. They had faced a god weapon, a being of impossible power, and they had won. Not through overwhelming strength, but through trust, strategy, and a perfect fusion of their disparate, clashing talents. He had been the mind, but they had been the hands, the blade, the shield. They were more than his followers. They were a single, living weapon. A family forged in the light of a dying god. They had won the battle. But as they looked up at the silent, black wound in the sky, they all knew with a chilling certainty that the progenitor had more weapons. The war had only just begun. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Cracking Seal. Victory was not glorious. It was the taste of ash in the mouth and the deep, grinding ache of bones pushed past their breaking point. Arborea was saved, but the cost was written on the faces of its defenders. In the nascent town square, Saria, her noble posture slumped with exhaustion, directed her weary centaurs in tending to the wounded. The silver forest was already healing itself, its inherent life force stitching over the scars of the battle, but the living could not mend so quickly. Mito Uzumaki had not left her tower. The train of anchoring the entire valley's reality against a divine weapon had left her pale and trembling, her chakra coils feeling frayed like old rope. She was propped against a wall, sipping a cup of water Akino had brought her. Her sharp mind for once too tired to even process the data from the battle. Rias, her usual aristocratic grace replaced by a raw, weary transparency, was helping organize supplies. Her peerage moving with a quiet, somber efficiency. They had faced a god and survived. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the stark, terrifying knowledge of what they were up against. Naruto stood in the center of it all, a pillar of calm in the weary aftermath. He was the anchor, his own immense reserves replenishing the energy of the land, but he could feel the toll the battle had taken on his people. He had guided them, commanded them, but they were the ones who had bled. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than any celestial attack. It was then that the world lurched. It wasn't a tremor in the earth. It was a stutter in existence. For a single, sickening second, the light from the silver trees flickered, the sound of the wind cut out, and the very air seemed to lose its substance. Every single person in the valley stumbled, a wave of collective vertigo washing over them. Mito's head snapped up, her exhaustion instantly replaced by a jolt of pure terror. Her eyes, wide and horrified, met Naruto's across the clearing. They didn't need to speak. They both knew the source. The strain of the battle, the violent clash between the Purifier's absolute order and Arborea's chaotic life force, had been too much. The delicate, ancient seal, already failing, had been the epicenter of that metaphysical collision. The chamber, Naruto's thought was not a suggestion, but a command that cut through the weary haze. He was already moving, not running, but flowing across the ground towards the dead zone and the ancient ruins. The others, Rias, Saria, Kuroka Matiri, aleasing from a nearby shadow, followed without a second's hesitation, their fatigue burned away by a fresh, cold dread. They descended the stone steps into a scene of quiet horror. The chamber, once pulsing with a slow, dying rhythm, was now in its death throes. The glowing lines of the primeval array were strobing erratically, sections of the massive seal flickering and dying out completely. In the very center of the array, a thin, black line had appeared. It was a crack, not in the stone, but in the concept of the seal itself. From this crack, a darkness was leaking. It wasn't a liquid or a gas. It was a creeping patch of wrongness. The stone floor around the crack was shifting, its texture resolving and unresolving into impossible, fractal patterns. The air tasted of static and ozone, and a low, dissonant hum, like a warped musical note, filled the chamber, making their teeth ache. As they watched, a shape began to unfold from the crack. It was not born, it was extruded, a being of pure chaotic geometry emerging into their dimension. It was a shifting, crystalline lattice of impossible angles, its form constantly folding in on itself. It had no front or back, no limbs or eyes, only a slow, mesmerizing, and utterly alien motion. It was not large, perhaps the size of a man, but its presence was immense. The laws of physics were unraveling in its immediate vicinity. Su, who had been a clear, placid pool at Naruto's feet, recoiled, its simple form trembling violently. It was pure life, and this new being was something else entirely. An equation that didn't belong in this reality. The creature, the echo of ruin, did not seem hostile. It didn't lash out. It simply hovered a few feet above the floor, its geometric form slowly rotating, and the world around it quietly coming apart at the seams. A drip of condensation from the ceiling fell near it, and instead of hitting the floor, it simply vanished, its existence nullified. By the arch-sages, Mito whispered, her voice trembling. It's a conceptual solvent. It doesn't destroy reality. It dissolves it. Then we must destroy it. Saria declared, her exhaustion forgotten, her hand gripping her lance. She took a step forward, her warrior's instinct screaming at her to neutralize the threat. How? Kuroka's voice was a low, tense growl from the shadows. You can't stab a math problem, Saria. What is there to even hit? It was in that moment of tense, uncertain horror that the new presence appeared. The air in the stairwell shimmered, and the Otsutsuki herald materialized. It was the same one from the psychic broadcast, its form radiating a cold, celestial arrogance. It surveyed the scene, the cracked seal, the chaotic being, the horrified defenders, with an expression of grim satisfaction. Behold, the fruits of your defiance. The herald's voice was a calm, resonant chime in their minds. You harbored a cosmic perversion, and in your struggle, you have unleashed a true abomination. This, Echo, is a rem, and of the formless chaos that existed before the progenitor brought order to the multiverse. Its very presence is a poison that will unmake your entire world from the inside out. He floated down the steps, stopping a safe distance away. He ignored all of them except Naruto. But the progenitor is merciful, the herald continued, its tone maddeningly reasonable. He does not wish to see this world and its inhabitants erased by a chaotic accident. He offers you a reprieve, a new bargain. He gestured with one pale hand towards the slowly rotating Echo. That thing is an anomaly, a flaw. It has no place in a structured reality. But it is young, a mere fragment, and vulnerable. Your power, Naruto Uzumaki, the power of the Shinju that you have so perverted, is the one force in this dimension capable of truly unmaking it. You can erase it as you erased our scout. The offer hung in the air, a poisoned lifeline. Destroy this chaotic filth, the herald declared, its voice ringing with divine authority. Purge this flaw from existence, and the progenitor will consider your debt paid. He will withdraw his forces. He will leave you and your little kingdom in peace. You will have saved your world. You need only do what is necessary. The council was silent, the terrible logic of the offer settling upon them. Kuroka was the first to break the silence. He's right, she hissed, her voice low. I don't like it. I don't trust him. But that thing is a plague. You kill one rat to save a city from disease. It's cold, but it's the only move. Saria looked torn, her honorable soul at war with her duty as a protector. To kill a being that has not shown hostility, it feels wrong. But to stand by while it unmakes our home, that is a greater sin. My lord, I believe we must act. Rias and Mito exchanged a look, the weight of the cosmic stakes pressing down on them. They were seeing the cold, hard calculus of the gods. To save billions, you might have to sacrifice one. Even an innocent one. All eyes turned to Naruto. The herald watched him, a faint, knowing smile on its lips. It had presented him with an impossible choice, a perfect trap. If he refused, his world would be destroyed by the Echo. If he accepted, he would become a monster in his own eyes, a killer of the innocent, a pragmatist who sacrificed his own principles for survival. He would be proving the herald's point, that in the end, all beings, even him, would bow to necessity. He would become just another god, making ugly choices for the greater good. Naruto's gaze was not on the herald. It was on the Echo. He stepped forward, the ground beneath his feet remaining solid, his own immense reality field holding the chaotic dissolution at bay. He could feel it. The Echo was not a being of malice. It was more like a newborn, utterly unaware of the effect its mere existence was having on the fragile reality around it. It was unique. It was, in its own impossible way, alive. And it was alone. He thought of his own childhood, of being hated not for what he did, but for what he was. For the monster sealed inside him. He saw a reflection of that same loneliness in this impossible, geometric creature. No, the single word, spoken in the minds of everyone present, was absolute. The herald's smile vanished. You would doom your entire world for the sake of one creature. For a sentimental principle, that is not the choice of a king. It is the choice of a fool. A king protects all his people. Naruto's voice was calm, but underneath it was a foundation of unshakable iron. Even the ones who don't fit. Even the ones the world has no place for. I will not kill it. Then what is your solution, fool? The herald sneered. Will you watch as it erases everything you have built? Mito suddenly understood. Her eyes widened, a look of horrified awe on her face as she realized what Naruto was about to do. Naruto. No. The strain, your soul, you can't. Naruto turned his gaze to her, a silent look of gratitude and apology. She was right. He couldn't fix the seal from the outside. The power differential was too great. He had to reinforce it from within. I will not kill it, his thought voice repeated, resonating through the chamber. And I will not let it harm my home. If the world has no place for it, I will make a place. I will become its anchor. Its cage. Its world. He turned his back on the stunned herald and walked towards the echo of ruin. The creature, perhaps sensing the empathy in his approach, did not move. Mito explained his plan in a choked, horrified whisper to the others. The primeval array is a living seal. It needs a will, a consciousness, to power it. The original Uzumaki sacrificed their lives to become that will. He's going to do the same. But he's not going to die. He's going to push a part of his own soul, his own consciousness, into the seal. He's going to exist in two places at once. Here, with us, and in there, in the void, holding that thing in a state of perpetual balance. It's a living sacrifice. He will be permanently divided. Permanently weakened. The full weight of his decision crashed down upon them. He was choosing to endure an eternal, conceptual torment to save both an innocent creature and his own people. He was taking the entire problem, the entire impossible choice, and making it a part of himself. The herald stared, its celestial arrogance finally cracking to reveal pure disbelief. It had offered Naruto a choice between being a monster and being a failure. Naruto had chosen a third path, to be a martyr. You are insane, the herald breathed, and vanished. Its mission an utter failure. Naruto stood before the shimmering, geometric echo. He raised a hand, not to strike, but to offer a connection. For the first time, he spoke aloud. His voice quiet but clear in the silent chamber. You are not alone anymore. He placed his hand on the crack in the seal. His own brilliant, golden energy, the life force of the 10 tails, began to pour into the void. It did not fight the chaos. It enveloped it, a warm, living light that began to weave a new prison, a new sanctuary, a new reality inside the broken one. A part of him, a sliver of his very soul, went with it. A willing prisoner to become an eternal warden. The chamber groaned as the seal began to mend, but everyone present felt the shift. They felt the core of Naruto's immense power. The anchor of their entire world, dimmed slightly, as a piece of it was willingly given away into the dark. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. War Against Heaven's Throne. The world was quieter. It was a subtle, pervasive change that only those closest to Naruto could truly feel. The vibrant, overwhelming life force of Arborea was still there, a thrumming symphony of existence, but its conduit. Cedar was now leading with one hand tied behind his back. Naruto's presence, once a constant, sun-like radiance, now had a shadow to it, an echo of a distant, silent vigil he was keeping in a dimension of pure chaos. He had not collapsed. He had not even faltered. When the new, reinforced seal had settled, its light a steady, golden hum instead of the dying Uzumaki blue, he had simply turned and walked out of the chamber. But his matriarchy saw the change. There was a new depth in his cosmic eyes, a hint of an immense, eternal strain that he bore without complaint. Mito's dire prediction had been correct. He was weakened. His soul divided. He was still a god, but he was a wounded one. And his enemy knew it. The sky did not tear open this time. Reality did not bend. The Otsutsuki progenitor came not with the fanfare of a celestial weapon, but with the chilling silence of a predator that knows its prey is injured. One moment, the sky above Arborea was clear. The next, he was there. He was not a being of light or energy. He looked, unsettlingly, like a man. Incredibly tall and impossibly ancient, with skin the color of polished bone and long, flowing white hair that seemed to absorb the light around it. He wore simple, elegant white robes, and his eyes were a pure, depthless black, holding not stars or galaxies, but the utter, absolute void between them. He had no horns, no third eye. He needed no such vulgar displays of power. His very presence was a declaration of supremacy. He was the Otsutsuki progenitor, the first god, the cosmic gardener. And he had come to pull the weed. So, the progenitor spoke. And his voice was not a psychic command or a telepathic touch, but actual sound waves that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, a voice that was both a whisper and a thunderclap. The perversion sacrifices a piece of itself to protect a flaw. You have broken every law of nature, every tenet of order. You are not a creature of life. You are a disease of sentimentality. And the only cure for a disease is its complete and utter eradication. Naruto stood in the central clearing, looking up at the being floating 1,000 feet above him. His council, his matriarchy, gathered behind him. Saray's hand was white-knuckled on her lance. Rias's body crackled with crimson demonic energy. They were ready to fight, to die for him. But they all knew, on a primal, instinctual level, that this was not a battle they could win for him. This was a confrontation between two opposing laws of the universe. You speak of order. Naruto's thought voice was quieter now, less a broadcast and more a focused personal address to the being in the sky. But you mean sterility. You speak of law, but you mean control. You are a gardener who fears any flower he did not plant himself. The progenitor's expression did not change, but the void in his eyes seemed to deepen. Words. The last refuge of the weak. I will not make the mistake of sending my creations to do my work. I will unmake you myself. And I will do it with the very laws you have defied. He raised a single, slender finger. He did not fire a beam or summon a meteor. He simply pointed at Saria Shianis. And her gravity vanished. The proud centaur knight yelped in shock as she was lifted from the ground, tumbling helplessly into the air. The fundamental force that bound her to the world had simply been turned off for her. The progenitor pointed another finger, at Rias. Her power of destruction, the chaotic crimson energy that surrounded her, instantly neutralized itself, imploding into a harmless puff of pinkish smoke. The very concept of her power had been negated. He did not need to attack them. He was simply editing them out of the equation, revoking their abilities as a man might revoke a privilege. This was the power of the progenitor. Absolute authority over the fundamental laws of existence. Enough. Naruto moved. He didn't fly. He simply stepped onto the air, and then again, walking up an invisible staircase into the sky to meet his foe. As he rose, the effects of the progenitor's will faltered. Saria dropped back to the earth with a heavy thud, her gravity restored. Rias's power surged back to life, angrier than before. Naruto's own reality field was pushing back, creating a bubble where the progenitor's edits could not take hold. You resist, the progenitor noted, with a flicker of academic curiosity. Your will is strong, but you are a single, defiant note in a symphony I have written. And I will simply write you out. He raised his hands, and the battle of concepts began. The progenitor attacked with physics. He tried to accelerate Naruto's atoms to the point of fission. But Naruto, his soul now touched by the formless chaos of the echo he was guarding, was no longer entirely bound by atomic structure. He simply held his form, his will refusing to allow him to come apart. The progenitor attacked with time. He attempted to age Naruto 1,000,000 years in a second, to turn him to dust. But Naruto, whose very essence was now tied to the eternal, timeless vigil within the seal, simply existed outside the flow of causality the progenitor was trying to impose. They fought not with fists and energy blasts, but with their very natures, a silent, titanic struggle across dimensions. To the onlookers below, it was a terrifying, incomprehensible light show. The sky would flash with the color of a dying sun, then fold in on itself into a black hole, then blossom into a field of impossible, fractal flowers. Naruto and the progenitor were flickering in and out of existence. Two gods wrestling with the source code of the universe. But Naruto was losing. The strain was immense. His divided soul meant his focus was not absolute. He was pushing back, but the progenitor was the original author of these laws. For every law Naruto defied, the progenitor could write a new one. And as they fought, something else was happening. Their battle, this clash of cosmic wills, was resonating through the multiverse. It was a broadcast, and Naruto, with a dawning realization, understood he could shape what that broadcast showed. He stopped fighting back in the conventional sense. He stopped trying to overpower the progenitor's will. Instead, he opened himself up. He let his own history, his own memories, his own truth, become a weapon. He broadcast the vision from the chamber of the seal. Across every dimension, across every fold of reality where an Otsutsuki clan member resided, the vision appeared in their minds. They saw it all. They saw the progenitor, their revered first god, not as a bringer of order, but as a terrified survivor. They saw the war against the echoes of ruin. They saw the Otsutsuki not as conquerors, but as desperate jailers, building prisons for beings whose chaotic nature they feared. They saw that their entire history, their entire culture of divine right and celestial purity, was a lie built on a foundation of terror. And then, Naruto showed them a new vision. A vision of the future. He showed them Arborea. He showed them centaurs and devils and humans in a slime living and working together. He showed them the choice he had made in the chamber. The choice to protect the innocent echo, not to destroy it. He showed them a new way. Not the sterile, rigid order of the progenitor, but a vibrant, chaotic, and compassionate synthesis. He was not just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting an ideological war for the soul of the Otsutsuki clan. In the void above Arborea, the progenitor felt it. He felt the seeds of doubt, sprouting in the minds of his children across 1,000 worlds. He felt his absolute authority, the bedrock of his power, begin to crack. For the first time in his billion-year existence, he felt a flicker of something he had never known: fear. Blasphemy. He roared, his voice for the first time filled with genuine fury. You cannot. I am the truth. He abandoned the subtle manipulation of laws and gathered his power for a final, absolute attack. The void in his eyes expanded, a sphere of perfect, total non-existence forming in his hands. It was an attack that would not just kill Naruto. It would erase his entire timeline, his past, his present, his future, from the ledger of reality. But Naruto was ready. He had bought himself the one thing he needed, a moment of doubt in his enemy's heart. And in that moment, the progenitor's control over the fundamental laws of the universe was no longer absolute. Naruto reached into the deepest part of himself. Not to the raw power of the 10 tails, but to the chaotic, impossible nature of the echo he now guarded. He didn't counter the sphere of non-existence. He welcomed it. The sphere struck him, and passed right through him. The progenitor stared, his mind unable to comprehend what had just happened. Naruto's form flickered. He was solid, then translucent, then a swirl of golden light, then a being of impossible, shifting geometry, mirroring the echo he protected. He had done the one thing the progenitor thought impossible. He had embraced the chaos. He had stopped being a being of pure life and order and had become a perfect fusion of order and chaos. He was no longer just the Jinchuriki of the 10 tails. He was the warden of the formless. He was a paradox, a living synthesis. Your laws no longer apply to me. Naruto's voice was no longer a thought. It was a fact, as solid and real as the ground below. Because I am no longer part of your ordered world. He reached out. He did not strike the progenitor. He did not try to unmake him. He simply placed a hand on the ancient god's chest. And he gave him a gift. He gave him the one thing the progenitor had spent his entire existence trying to destroy: empathy. He poured a sliver of his own soul, his own history, into the progenitor. The loneliness of a childhood hated by all. The pain of losing his friends. The fierce, desperate love for his comrades. The unwavering belief in the good of others. The progenitor screamed. It was a raw, agonized sound, the cry of a perfect, sterile equation being confronted with a messy, irrational human emotion. The void in his eyes was shattered, replaced by a swirling, chaotic torrent of images and feelings he could not process. His divine authority, built on detachment and certainty, crumbled under the weight of a single, genuine tear shed for a lost friend. He was not dead. He was not defeated in battle. He was broken, dethroned. His entire identity, his very reason for being, had been dismantled by a single act of radical empathy. He collapsed in on himself. Not dying, but shrinking, his divine form receding into that of a simple, old, terrified man. He vanished, fleeing to a forgotten corner of the multiverse to grapple with the new, terrible knowledge of what it meant to feel. The battle was over. The god was gone. Naruto floated alone in the silent sky. He had not won by destroying his enemy. He had won by destroying the idea of his enemy. He had proven that compassion was a stronger force than cosmic law. The age of the Otsutsuki progenitor was over. The Otsutsuki clan, their foundation of faith shattered, was now adrift, on the verge of a civil war of ideas. And in the center of it all stood Arborea, a tiny, impossible kingdom that had just dethroned heaven itself. Chapter 9 End.